the drummers that like 15 years ago that were classified as technical drummers, Virgil Donati, Thomas Lang, Matt Garshkas, like these kind of Marco Minimans, turn the sound off, but just watch them move. You may not want to be that guy or girl, and that's cool. What we can do is we can reverse engineer these high-level specimens and go, what's working for them, and what can I reverse engineer and apply into my life? And I think there's a lot that we can learn from them.
What is up? Welcome back to the Drum Show podcast. I'm really excited about today's guest. I've followed him for quite a while online and taken a lot of insight from what he does. And a lot of the topics he discusses, especially on, I think his Instagram is where he's posting quite frequently. At least that's where I ran across Brandon Green, everyone. And it's near and dear to my heart because I work with a ton of drummers that it's a physical instrument. Not every instrument is as physical as ours is. And so we have to deal with that element of physicality, how we hit, to help us have a longer career, whether that just be playing in your basement or you're a professional drummer. And this is one of the things that especially touring drummers talk about a ton, is it takes a toll on your body. When you're playing 5, 6, 7 nights a week, you're playing anywhere from 90 to, 3 hours, 90 minutes to 3 hours. And you're playing in big venues. It takes a big toll on the body after a while. And so you really do have to watch the physical side of things. And enter, shall I say, Brandon Green, who is somewhat of an expert in this area. And so we're gonna dance around a couple of topics and see if we can't get you some useful info around these topics of, I think we'll probably jam around some repetitive use injuries, repetitive motion injuries, and we'll jam around the physicalness of this instrument. Brandon, what's up, man?
Not much, man. Steven, thanks so much for having me. It's an absolute honor to be here. Been following you for a long time. And honestly, congratulations to you. I mean, I've seen you for over 10 years go from a very small YouTube page and following and really blow up. So the combination of how you're giving back to your community, the way you've developed your marketing and your presence, you've just done a brilliant job. So congratulations and thank you for having me.
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. What's that old Southern saying? Even a blind squirrel gets a nut every now and then. So if I just stick at it long enough, I guess eventually something will work with it.
Right.
Okay, so you're a drummer.
Correct.
And in your day-to-day, you work with people on the physical side. So what is it exactly you do, and how are you connecting these two passions in your life?
So on paper, I'm a fitness professional with an expertise and mastery certificate education in biomechanics and muscle system and motor learning. The day-to-day, I do and operate in my business. I've got a gym in Newmarket, Ontario, north of Toronto. It's 4,000 square feet with an amazing team of training and staff. And we work in tandem with local healthcare providers. So from people, surgeons, physical therapists, athletic therapists, like really what we do in my business is anyone, when they finish physical therapy, or they're stuck and frustrated and haven't found the progress they're looking for with some traditional rehab means, they come to us and we use exercise in strategic ways to help them post-surgery, post-injury, post-trauma, to get into chronic injury states and really focus on this idea of having a very strong, healthy body as they get older. It's not just about necessarily being older, but it's really about having high quality health as our clients get older. So day to day, I mean, this morning at 8 a.m., I had a retired NHL athlete I worked with. My last client that I just had was someone who was 75, struggling with suboccipital pain. So the gamut of people we have in here varies. My passion for drumming started before fitness and exercise. It really was the first thing I fell in love with. And for many reasons, because growing up in a small suburban town, becoming a professional drummer just didn't seem like a rational decision for me in my area. I was still in love with it though. So I focused on developing my career, developing my passion, opening my business. I have a few different companies that I operate, and it's a lot of fun. But drumming has always been my active meditation, the thing that I turn back to. It's where I challenge myself, I push myself, I gig, I have fun. But it was about 7 or 8 years ago, one of my best friends who was the local drumming guy in town, right? Like when you're in high school, if you weren't the drummer, there's always like in a small town, like the drummer guy. I was not the drummer guy. I was a drummer, but there was the guy. And he posted 7 or 8 years ago, he goes, F the drums. The drums have hurt my back. I've been playing for all these years. I'll never play again because my back hurts from playing the drums. And I was just like, what the frank? That makes no sense. I mean, this thing, although it is a physics-based instrument and our body has to be in all these different positions and do all these things, it is an art form. It is a passion. It is something that's so powerful that you can rhythmically do for your entire life, should be able to. So when I heard this young 30-year-old guy was crippled because of it, it just seemed crazy. And around that time, you heard about the late Neil Peart struggling with body pain issues, stopping him from drumming. Dave Silva years prior from Korn stopping because of issues. Phil Collins with his back. And it just made me angry because my day-to-day was either teaching personal trainers about exercise science or working with people to get through these problems. So to be quite honest, I've told the story before, but the Coles Notes is I made an ad hoc video on YouTube where I just turned on my MacBook Air, no production value whatsoever, and I just talked about drum throne mechanics, sitting mechanics, really, and spinal mechanics, and that video went viral. And it was crazy, and it turned into this awesome opportunity where I wrote for Modern Drummer, and I've been consulting professional drummers at a very high level for fun. I should say for fun for me, but for them for very serious reasons. And it's just been ongoing for a while. It's just been really a passion project. Yeah. The stuff I talk about at a high on day to day, so sorry, but stuff I talk day to day is so complicated and advanced because we're dealing with such advanced disease states that talking about what drummers deal with is rather simple in contrast. And it's just an honor to give back as much as I can to help people keep playing forever.
Yeah, you know, and so just to kind of bring everybody into, no matter the age you're playing, kind of how physical an instrument it is. I had Pete Parada in quite a number of years ago. I was a personal trainer, so whenever I decided to come off the road, for anyone that doesn't know, I didn't want to be away from my family all the time. And when you build your career around the only way you can make money is if you leave your family, that doesn't, those two don't work together. So I had to figure some stuff out. And I had always been interested in fitness. And so I doubled down and got certified to become a personal trainer and began about a 5 or 6 year period where I was doing personal training for kind of my bread and butter. And then I joined a band. I thought it was just for fun, and then we wound up getting signed by Universal Records. So I guess that turned into something else. But I really took a step back to kind of assess what I wanted to do with music, and which is where I started this, and it gave me the time and space to begin doing this. And I had Pete come in, Pete Parada, who was with The Offspring for, I don't know, a very long time, maybe 13 years. I may be getting that wrong. Now he's in his own group and they're out touring, they're just killing it. And so he played in a very aggressive style of music. And so I wanted to kind of prove through actual, measurements of like, here's the BPMs, here's the heart rate, all of these things. And so we took the average BPM of his songs. We took how much weight he was losing when he was on, average when he was on tour. He was coming back about 5 pounds lighter. And mind you, this is with eating food that's on the road, which is not great food. And then, there's copious amounts of other substances that may be in, beer being one of them. So these aren't like low calorie foods. So, but we took that, and what we came up with was from my rudimentary measurements was that the caloric burn was right at the rate of an Olympic soccer player. Now, fast forward, and I wish I could remember the doctor. I was going to have her on the podcast, and then that fell through. But she has been measuring heart rate with professional drummers. She goes
Nadia
around.
Azar.
Thank you.
Yes, Nadia, I know her as well. She's awesome.
Yeah, amazing. We just couldn't work out the schedules. And sure enough, her studies fell right in line with what we thought the caloric burn, the heart rate burst, all of that was happening. And the thing is, with an Olympic soccer player, they may play a game every week. Like on a busy week, they might play 2, but that's a really hard week, right? When you're on tour, it's 5 to 7 nights a week until it's over, right? So you're doing that every night, and it takes a big toll on the body to do this, to play that hard, to have those types of heart rate bursts. You have to be in shape. And when you come home from a tour, you are in shape. Whether you were when you left or not, you're in some shape, some worse than others. Yeah. And so, so just to kind of bring home with everybody, you may be playing in your basement, but even at that, we are moving more than many other instruments that you play than maybe just strumming a guitar. Some people ask me, why am I out of breath? Why am I holding my breath? And I'm like, look, we are hitting these things. So I just kind of wanted to let everyone understand how physical of an instrument this is, which leads us to the myriad of different ailments and injuries we can have. I was talking to my students yesterday on a call. For the students in my Drum Better Daily program, we do a couple calls every week, group calls. And I was telling them, I said, the frustrating thing about me for beginner drummers is if you get a piano it's just a piano. It's set up like a piano. You can't adjust anything. Like you can't move the keys around. You can't raise these keys a foot. You can't do anything. If you're lucky, maybe you can adjust the bench. But if you got one of the old wooden benches, then you're out of luck there too, right? The same thing with, like, they don't give you a French horn and they're like, now go ahead and however, you feel, set that up. No, it's a French horn, it's a guitar. But with drums, we get like 15 pieces and you can adjust everything, literally everything to do with them. So you have students coming in that their legs are like this and one's like this and one's, like this, and they're hitting like this and the cymbals are, and I'm like, wait a sec. Okay, hold on. Before we can even go any further, let's sort this out, at least make it make sense, right? So I want to dive into what are some of the most common injuries that we have and how can we avoid those? Because and let's touch on and let everybody understand. I'm kind of prefacing this, and then I'm going to just give Brandon the stick, and he's going to run with it. Let's preface this with exactly what are repetitive motion injuries, what are repetitive use injuries, and how those can injure us as opposed to somewhat immediate injuries. So, go.
I think there's two ways to look at this, and there's a lot to discuss. I think there's two common ways that drummers get injured. I think one is kind of what I would call like level 1 injuries, which is body positioning and ergonomics. If you are positioned in a way that your body cannot operate, but because of the instrument you have, the positioning, the tools you have, it will cause problems. Like, for example, if someone is sitting, we're not even in a repetitive strain yet, so bear with me, but if someone is sitting too low, and their coxifemoral joint literally doesn't have the amount of hip flexion available in that joint, right? That creates the opportunity for an anterior capsule impingement. If they don't get that and they're playing big full leg bass drum strokes with the legs coming up and down, well, there's something called
what is anterior capsule?
So it's the so if you have the front of the hip, right, coxifemoral joint is the femur going into the innominate, and so you have this ball and socket joint. So right at the top of the capsule, you have a bunch of soft tissue, small muscles and tissue, labrum. And so if you can't go any further, the door hinge can't go anymore. And so the door hinge either hits the end of the wall, or it bumps into some of the soft tissue, which helps to dissipate some of that energy. So you have like that anterior capsule impingement. There's a lot of different variations of it, labral tears. It's basically the door can't open anymore, and the stuff that stops the door starts to get pinched. Now, if that doesn't happen for someone sitting too low, when you run out of motion there, the body operates in these great kinetic chains, which, as you would know, but when one link can't move anymore, it will move at the next link, pretty much predictably so, depending on the plane of motion. So if I run out of hip motion, there's something called the lumbo-pelvic rhythm, where when the hip runs out, the lower back starts to move. And you see this when someone squats or sits in a chair, right? Their hip moves to a certain degree of hip flexion, and then their lower back starts to round concurrently. These two things, these systems operate together as one system almost in most scenarios. But when you're drumming and you go into the hip flexion, you can't move anymore, and the lower back moves, right? If you think about the number of times someone plays a kick drum stroke in a 3-hour gig and a 4-on-the-4 show, they're playing a lot. That's a lot. And so these small motions at end range positions are not problems, but it's when you do it 100,000 times, 1,000,000 times over years. And so a lot of these professional drummers I'm talking to nowadays, and I'm sure you could attest to some of this for sure, is that there's some high-level guys and they've been on tour for 5 years. And on the 4th year, they started feeling problems, but they're making money. They're on these shows. They can't stop. And then the 5th year, those things become bigger problems. And then the real question is, well, what do I do about it? So, yeah.
A lot of people don't understand how smart the body actually is without us telling it what to do. I get constant questions from students, and they say, I'm having this problem. I look down and the stick is like this, and I started like this, and I don't understand why it's like this. I said, do you understand why it's like this? I said, your body is not stupid. And it says, hey, dummy, if we grip it back here, we can have a lot more leverage and we can hit harder, because that seems to be what you're wanting to do, is hit hard. So body, and so you will find it automatically choking up. And there's, as you pointed out, there's a million other things that the body just naturally, without us even thinking about, does to accommodate whatever motion it is we're doing. And I injured myself in a big way in my wrists doing this. And I did post about this with several videos. This is a long time ago. There's a doctor here in town named Preston Wakefield, and he worked part-time with the Predators, part-time with the Titans, and then he worked on musicians. And all of their ailments. He worked on nerve entrapment and active release therapy. And I went in there, they told me I was going to have surgery, and it came from very small motions. I was working on a lot of polyrhythms, which I use in everyday music now. But I was working on these right, and really trying to get them, and I wasn't moving my hands very much. It was the same motions every day. And it was pretty extreme pain in both. And they had told me, this is carpal tunnel, you're gonna have it. And I went into him and he flipped my wrist over and he felt around and he said, no, it's not carpal tunnel. And I said, okay, well, what is it? And he said, well, there's your problem. And he put my hand on it and I said, I don't feel anything there. He said, well, that's your problem. I said, well, cool, fix it. So he started moving the pain in my arm and he would ask me, where is it now? Where's it now? And I said, look, buddy, if you can move it, just like shoot it out my fingers, you know, if you got superpowers here. But I thought I was going to have to go have surgery. And I've had several students that have thought the same. And I've said, hold up, before we start slicing, go see these people, people like yourself that can help from a very structural standpoint. Because we feel pain and we think, oh no, this is going to last forever.
Yeah.
And then what we find out is it's actually fixable, and we can get around this. So go ahead, proceed.
Yeah. So then the other side of it. So like, let's say you have your ergonomics and your body positioning perfect. Like, let's just put that off the table. The next side of it is repetitive strain injury, like you're kind of alluding to. And the challenge with the repetitive strain injury continuum is there's two big problems. One is like, if you take the common things like drummers get, like carpal tunnel syndrome, for example, or they get golfer's elbow or tennis elbow or something of that nature. Those are all very common, right? Those are
to clarify for everybody, golfer's elbow is underneath here and tennis elbow is more of a, and I'm talking in general terms to kind of dumb it down for people like me, is on top here would be tennis elbow.
Yeah. And so people you might hear medial condylitis and lateral condylitis, like you're saying, inside, outside pain, carpal tunnel, soreness here, name your thing, right? All of those different things could pop up. There's two challenges. One, when you have something and it's given a name in the medical world, it now becomes classified as a disease. And that's where they can have interventions, where they can prescribe medicines and different forms of treatments from healthcare, depending on where you are in the world. So when you have carpal tunnel syndrome, that's where like surgical intervention, much more aggressive treatments start to pop up. The truth is, though, when you think of like the word, like you look it up and it's on PubMed or whatever you're looking up as far as the disease qualifications, when it gets called a disease, people think it's a thing that just happens naturally. Like it's just going to happen when you play the drums. But the truth is, like there's different diseases, like type 1 diabetes, you're born with it. You don't get that from playing the drums, right? Things like carpal tunnel syndrome, things like inside, outside elbow pain, you name your thing. Those are just not naturally occurring things. Those are mechanical conditions that happen over time. So if we understand, okay, wait, this isn't just a thing that's going to happen from playing the instrument, and it is mechanical. Well, what are the mechanical variables at play? Well, there's two simple things I like to break down. There's something in biology called hormesis, which is the dose-response relationship. So that's a fancy word for how do you get a blister? If I've got a blister, if I have skin, and I sit here and I rub my hand against my other hand for a long period of time, call it 15 minutes, I probably won't get a blister because the skin in my hand is firm enough. But if I rub and I put enough friction there, maybe I get sandpaper and I do enough of it, enough rubbing, and the first layer of skin scrapes against the bottom layer of skin and some fluid builds up, well, now I get a blister. But the difference between getting a blister and a callus, the only difference is time. How much dosing that I put into it and how much time that I allow to recover in between. And so when we get a blister, it's angry. It's hard. Sorry, it's not hot. It's soft. It's angry. And if we pop it, it gets angrier in most contexts, depending on where it is. But drummers, right, you get a blister. Everyone's had a blister from drumming. If you keep drumming with a blister, what happens to the blister? It gets angrier. It gets really bigger. It's not fun. So if we think that, most drummers know if I've got a blister, I can't drum through a blister unless you're getting paid a ton of money and you want to push through it. I mean, I think most know that. When it comes to the repetitive strain injury, it's the same continuum, right? Your muscles are sore from if muscles are sore from working out, it's wise to not strain them anymore. Right, you're feeling some tension where the muscle attached to the bone, the tendons, the ligaments, you feel a little strain or tension there. It's wise to not strain them anymore. And if you look up recovery windows, I was just trying to find it, but I can't. But you look up recovery windows from stressed tissue, right? Muscles can take, depends on the amount of trauma, 48 hours to 14 days to recover. Tendons and ligaments, depending on the continuum of strain from working out to damage, can take weeks to months. Mm-hmm. So if you work out and you're like, I'm going to body build, forget whatever your thing is, I'm going to work out my chest. Most people know if you train your chest every day or anything, it's going to hurt and it's going to get worse and worse. And that's just not a good idea. But with drumming, we don't, or any instrument, we don't think of it in that way, which means that when you're playing, the muscles accumulate more and more fatigue. And unfortunately, most of us who are trying to get good at this instrument and trying to make a living at it, practice 4 hours a day, play a 3-hour gig at night, and you've got 7 hours of stimulus. And because you don't get paid much at the very beginning and you're living at home and you're really desperate to make a go, you do 40, 50 hours of it. But if you do 40, 50 hours of chest training or leg training, that seems like a bad idea. But we accidentally do it in the instrument.
Yeah. And there's some, as you said, there are some that when you're doing it for a living, I saw a picture of Grayson McCrutman, fantastic player, and super kind guy. And I forget who he just went out with. They're on their last tour. Yeah, Sepultura. And he was high-fiving and stuff. Bloody fingers, they're all taped up. And anybody that's toured understands that when you get into a club environment, it's hot, it's moist, and skin starts tearing whenever you get on stage at a big festival. The altitude changes, all of those things. And those certain injuries, there's nothing you can do about it. You're going to have to get through it because otherwise they're going to get somebody else to do it, right? Yeah. But the layman, there's ways to avoid this, and there are ways to remedy this as well as rehab this without a very big intervention, oftentimes rest.
I mean, rest is the number one thing. And I did a social media post a while ago that I had, Craig Reynolds reached out to me. So my post was, I said, I don't think drummers should get blisters. I really don't. I mean, like, why? And I was trying to break down the mechanics. And I talked about hormesis, and he goes, and he messaged me, and he's like, listen, when you're playing on a hot stage and your hands are sweaty and you can't cool down your hands and you got to play the next day, it's going to happen. I was like, that's a good point. But that's also the challenge with this career. It's the same thing with professional football players or whatever sport you're into. You got to play to make money. You got to play to have a living. The choice is that there's an interesting continuum that pops up there for sure. So honestly, like you're insinuating, rest is the best remedy in most cases. But I also think where possible, if it's just practice, learning how to stagger different practice routines in a way that is beneficial to you is great. Like, let's say you want to be a really diverse drummer and you're learning all these particular shuffle patterns through the Drum Shed Academy, and it's going really, really good, but your right hand is exhausted from doing all the shuffling. Well, maybe you go, you know what? I'm going to focus on left hand lead shuffles. Maybe I'll never use it, but it's going to help my left hand get stronger. And now when I play a regular shuffle, my right hand's only playing one every 4 notes while my left is doing the other 4 notes. So now I'm getting 75% more rest. And who knows? This may turn into a pragmatic skill that when you're tired, you can actually play left hand lead when you need to, because when your body gets tired, which I do think for very basic 4 on the floor gigs is a really logical way to try and dissipate some of the stresses. Not necessarily going full open handed, but have both as options. Or, you know what? This week I'm going to work on double bass. I don't even want to do double bass, but it's going to help me develop my lower body, give my hands a break, and then I can come back the next week. But yeah,
there's a lot of us, I came up this way. I thought it was more and more practice. The more and more practice I can do, the better, right? And we all go through this. I think anybody that plays an instrument goes through this incubation phase. It's what I don't have another term for it. It's an incubation phase. And it can last anywhere from a few months to years for some people. And this is a time when you can't think about anything else. You don't want to do anything else. All you want to do is be in that practice room. And like you are seeing these massive advancements, and you're just pushing yourself. This is unsustainable for your entire life, though. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. And so as we get older, we have to learn how to practice smarter, not only physically, but mentally. And I talk to my students all the time about the same concept of rest. For the physical side, we have to rest for the mental side of this as well. There is only so much focus that is available to us. And if we're not focused in our practice, we truly are wasting time. And how do we recover from that? Well, it's recreational activities. It's sleep. Sleep is a huge one. I was reading a great book called Why We Sleep. And in there he was talking about, he said, look, when you sleep, sure, these parts of your brain go dim because they're resting, he said, but there are these other parts of your brain that light up. And we found the same brainwave patterns that were happening whenever you were learning this skill during the day. Your brain's doing those again, but at half the speed. So when you go to sleep, you are actually still learning this stuff. And especially if we like a super hack, whatever you're wanting to learn, if you will do that or concentrate on that or think about that before you go to sleep, your brain continues to work on that problem because you just prioritized it for the brain. You just said, hey, this is super important. And as you go to sleep, it goes, hey guys, I think he wants to think about this. And that's why you wake up in the morning with the lyrics to the song that you didn't have, or all of a sudden you sit down and you can do this thing that you couldn't do yesterday, or you wake up with the solution to the problem in your marriage or something like that, or the idea that's going to blow your business up. There's a reason that happened. Your brain's sitting there like, yeah, that was our work last night, but you go ahead and take credit for it. It was like, we did that while you were sleeping. And it's the same with practice and the physical side. The rest is one of our biggest allies, but we tend to view it as a negative thing. We tend to view it as, if I'm not on this instrument right now doing something, I'm not really practicing. And there are a ton of studies I can point people to. Of course, the landmark one is the role of deliberate practice in the acquisition of expert performance. That one's free for everybody to go look at. It's like 40 pages of a complete nerd fest if you want to just read through that. But it's where the 10,000 hour rule came from and all of those things. And it was talking about how much recreational activity, music-related activities, rest they had in comparison to how much practice they had. And so the thing they found was, and we can link this to the physical part of this, the link they found was the amount of focused, deliberate practice a person was able to do was not directly related to how much time they had to do it. It was directly related to how much time it took them to recover from their last deliberate practice session. That was what drove how long they were able to practice the next time, not how much time they had. And we tend to think of it backwards from there.
There's a great paper that Andrew, and you're brilliant stuff, man. There's a great paper that Andrew Huberman presented, which is a great podcast if anyone hasn't listened to him. But he talked about ultradian cycles, which is the amount of time that you can focus on a specific thing. And then there's another thing that I know of, like high level learners that are like in medical school and law school they use called the Pomodoro learning method, which the combination basically. The Pomodoro method takes like these short durations of learning, like you're saying, because you can only saturate yourself with new information for about 20 to 25 minutes on a specific subject before you start kind of just stopping because your body can't bring new information in. But what a lot of these high-level learners will do, if someone is committed to doing long practices, is they'll stagger like 2 or 3 subjects that are different but in the same world that are like this is very basic, but like hand rudiments, double bass, counting out loud. Right? 3 very separate things, but all related to drums. And they do 20 minutes here, rest, 20 minutes, rest, 20 minutes, rest. And then they cycle that every hour and 15 minutes or whatever you want to call it. But it allows them to continue to saturate information. And really, if they're committed to doing those crazy long practices. But like you're saying, like I don't know, you probably heard this, but the number of pro drummers we listen to, like I shed 8 hours each day when I was 13 all the way till I was 20. And that's what maybe who I am today. Maybe, but I'm sure they weren't shredding the same thing for hours. And if they were, they definitely wasted time, which is very interesting. Yeah. And that's one of the time periods of my life where I made the most progress, not only in this instrument, but it was when I was in college, and I also had to learn vibraphone. I had to pass a piano proficiency. I was learning a lot of stuff, and so the university I went to wouldn't let you say that drum set was your primary instrument. That wasn't an option. Of course not.
You were a percussion major, and so. French horn, got to learn the French horn. Drummers had to learn timpani and drum set and snare drum and vibraphone and marimba and, like and. So I got great use out of using a split practice session where a lot of the people would want to only come to their classes in the morning or in the afternoon or something. I would get up with my wife at 5:30 because she was teaching school, and I would get a couple hours of practice in. I would go to a couple of classes, and then about 10 a.m., I'd go to the practice room for about an hour, and then I'd have another class, and then I had lunch, and then I had a practice session, and then I went to another class, and then another class, and an ensemble, and then a practice session. But it broke up 4 or 5 hours of practice time over like a 12-hour period. And man, the amount of progress that I saw was pretty incredible. And I think it was, I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I was just trying to work around my class schedule.
Yeah.
But I really think it had to do with being able to practice in that way and have that split practice plan.
It's way better for sure. Sorry, but yeah, I love that, man. It's great to hear.
We're getting, so we're getting regular injuries. What are a few practical things that we can do to assess where these injuries are coming from or how they're happening, or what is some very basic critical troubleshooting that we can do with our own bodies?
That's a good question. There's a few things we can talk about. So first and foremost, I mean, where are they coming from? I mean, I hate to say it, very initially, if you haven't seen a medical professional, following the subjective sensations is not a terrible idea. Like, what are you feeling and what do you do when you feel it? Like, if I push down on my hands with my palm down on the table, does that hurt? If I do palm up, does it feel the same? Palm down hurts, palm down, palm up doesn't. So you start to get a little bit more information. One of the most successful strategies we've seen for helping people cope with some of these things, besides rest, is I am nervous around too much passive stretching unless it's administered by a health professional, only because we have so many joint systems that are involved that if someone pulls on something and they yank on a painful spot and it should have been pulled, like say someone has a tear in their medial epicondyle, that can be really risky. The joint tissue of the wrist. So one thing that we try to suggest is this kind of contract, relax strategy, which is much more about if it hurts on the inside, call it the flexors of the arm, contracting the extensors. And what's really interesting, and anyone can do this at home, is like if you flex your bicep muscle, right? Your bicep muscle flexes. If you also touch the muscle on the back side of your arm, your tricep, elbow extensors, it's also contracting equally. And this is really natural because when I contract the bicep, you're like, I'm showing off my muscle. If you didn't contract your tricep concurrently, you'd punch yourself in the face because there's so much tension going through there. That thing is just trying to approximate your joint. So you need that counter tension. Well, if I did the exact same bicep contraction by grabbing my table and pushing into the table as hard as I could, my bicep's still contracting, but my triceps completely relaxed. The equation instead becomes of front arm versus back arm, becomes front arm versus the table, which is very cool because if my tricep is extremely tense, it has some delayed onset muscle soreness, it has some level of strain, or it's just angry for something I did. If I do that same contract my bicep and let the tricep relax, it can create these short windows where the tricep gets a break. And maybe from a pain receptor response, the nociceptors actually get a chance to relax. So with the hands in particular, you've got a lot of fast twitch dominant tissues, which means they respond really well to isometric contractions via something called post-activation potentiation. So when I go back and I do an isometric into extension, this is not how I would do it. This is just weird. There we go. I push back into extension. My flexors actually get a chance to relax while my extensors contract at a high level. So I'm getting this natural relaxation that's happening, this inhibition, if you will, that helps the sense the angry area relax a little, which is very cool. I have one more thing, but any questions or thoughts around that?
No, I'm digging it so far. I just want to listen.
So cool. So then the thing you asked, which is a really good question and no one's asked, and I'm so stoked you asked, was how do I identify where these things are happening, right? Because most of the time, like if you have a system like an iPhone or a machine and it crashes all the time, we just see, okay, my car broke down. It's not moving. Well, how do we figure out what happened? Well, most of us, you're in a response position, so you have to react, and that's what we're talking about now. Well, how do we be proactive? Well, you take your car to the mechanic, and they go, you know what? Like I just got my oil changed on my truck, and he goes, you know what? You should check those brakes in 6 months. You're good right now, but in 6 months, you should check them. If he didn't tell me that, and 2 years went by, I'd have a problem. So the question is, well, how do we do that? I am not about to say, hey, take lessons with Brandon. You got to, no. What I'm saying is if you have concerns of an area, I think one thing that you can do is perform a very mindless exercise with specific things that we do. Like, for example, literally doing nothing special. You pick your technique, just play single strokes at a tempo with not single strokes, just strokes with one hand consistently to a metronome for as long as you can. And pay attention, where do you fatigue? Because if you're doing that and you're playing the rudiment, you're just playing. I pick a rudiment, pick any pattern, just go right hand until I get tired. And you go, okay, my right hand playing at 100 BPM, triplet, eighth notes, got tired at 6.5 minutes. And where I got tired was the inside of my thumb. While my left hand got tired at 3 minutes and it got tired in my thumb and my outside forearm muscles here. All of a sudden you get this very cool window of, okay, I'm getting tired in my weakest link in this particular thing. So now I can actually reverse engineer this and I can do exercises either on the pad or away from the drums to build this part of my body so I don't get tired there first. Because most of these repetitive strain injuries, if you are playing responsive, because there's a lot of people who play very responsibly and still get hurt. It happens not because they're doing something wrong, it's because the thing that failed in the machine, their shear pin, if you will, which is a terrible farming reference, if anyone knows what I'm talking about, their shear pin was one specific tissue that didn't have the tolerance for the thing, the amount or the time. So you can pick anything, right? Like one of my favorite ones, because I had a back issue from when I was powerlifting years ago. I was deep into that world. I had a back thing. So when I would drum, I would get a back thing once in a while, which also exposed me to this. The one thing I love to do as an exercise, not practical for drumming, is crossovers, groups of 3 from one floor tom on the right to the left side. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I have to move everything back and forth, like very Mike Mangini. Like I said, not pragmatic for most people, but I do it as a workout. And I pay attention. Where do I get tired? Is it the outside of my shoulder? Is it my left side back? Is it my right side back? Because I don't need to do that for any gig that I ever do. It's purely just a drumistic thing. But if I know my left side back gets tired when I go back and forth for 5 minutes of doing this particular thing, now I know where my weak link is. And now I know where I can build it up to ultimately make sure I don't shear pin there and have a major mechanical failure.
And, not only knowing where your weak links are, but also knowing, for me, it was an eye-opener to understand, because we always think about the weak areas, but also think about where my strong areas were and how those affect the weak areas that are on the other side. Very basic. We have push and pull muscles, right? Your chest is a push muscle, your back is a pull muscle, and we can delineate that out into very small portions, and we can go, well, this one's a puller and this one's right. So for me, I had a back issue for quite some time, which led to something else I'm going to ask you about here in a few minutes. I'm interested in your thoughts.
Sure.
And so I had a lot going on in life, was under a lot of stress. And one day I woke up and it felt like my head wanted to fall off my neck. Everything was super weak here. And I had this burning pain in the mid back. And that started years. I mean, it was that quick. I pulled up to my house one day and I remember staring at my garage, and all of a sudden it just all started. And that began a lot of years of physical therapy, going to doctors, trying to figure out like what was going on, And so one of the things that it led me to, there are a lot of things I feel that made it better. But one of the things that I talk to a lot of students about is they'll get this mid-back pain. And we don't understand how when we sit like this all day and we're slumped over, we think, oh, it's my back and I need to go stretch this thing and it's like, well, hold on, maybe you do or maybe you don't, because I know that my issue was I wasn't opening my chest enough, and so my stronger pectoral muscles were pulling too much on this and causing the term that I discovered was winging of my shoulder blades or scapula. And it was causing this burning because there's very small muscles underneath there because we don't have a lot of reason to contract those scapula. They're not near as strong as a pectoral or as a shoulder muscle. And so during my experience and kind of exploration of this I was like, wow, I need to open up my chest, and I actually need to strengthen these small groups of muscles in the back because they're getting over lengthened. They're being stretched too much because of my bad posture. I was sitting like this all the time, slumped over. And that's kind of, as you said, that's one thing in the chain of issues that I had, which led me to, I'm going to ask you about here in a few minutes, but it was kind of me discovering like, well, wait a second, when I kind of exactly what you said, when you flex this also flexes. And it's like there's a cause and effect within your body. And it does all move together whenever we're working through this.
Yeah, no, absolutely does.
The thing I wanted to ask you about was, as I was going through my opinion, there was a great book. I wish I could remember it. It was a doctor who treated a lot of physical pain, especially back pain. He treated it from the mental side first. Joe
Dispenza?
Yes, may have been him. I'm trying to remember. But he had a huge, it was like 78% recovery rate of his clients. And he treated it from a point of like, hey, where do you hold your anxiety? What are you angry about? What is this? What is that? He said this may have started as an injury, but then your brain begins to predict that that's injury, and then that becomes a trigger for whenever you get angry at someone. Now, there's a reason they used to say, hey, don't get stressed out, you're going to get an ulcer. Well, the body stopped producing ulcers because we figured it out, right? And so it puts that pain in other places. What I found was a lot of my back pain was triggered whenever I was under stress or whenever I was I was angry or upset about something. So I can almost now tell you I'm stressed. I'm not really sure about what, because my back will tense up and start to burn a little bit. And it has nothing to do with physical stuff. It very much has to do with, I need to figure that out. I believe it started with physical stuff. And then somehow, does that make any sense?
So yes, but almost impossible to quantify. I mean, that's
for sure.
the toughest thing. like if you think now you're going to a much deeper part of my world, which is a lot of fun, but when you think about the human body, I mean, it is a gigantic system, right? With amazing emergent behavior, like a flock of birds. Like if we really think about it, we have 640 muscles, all these bones, all these nerves, all these veins, arteries, everything, emotions, thoughts, subjective control. Like it's crazy. So in a lot of instances, I'm pretty sure it is Joe Dispenza. I might be saying his last name wrong because I was just talking to a client about this on Tuesday. That you're talking about in a really, really great book, right? The bridging the gap between emotions, neuroplasticity, and how the body responds. You know, when I walk into my bank and I'm going to do some business, there's one teller that I can't stand talking. And every time I see her, I just get a little anxiety and I get that weird feeling in my throat right here. And I just get a little uncomfortable and my body temperature changes a little bit. And it's to the point that every time I walk in that bank, I don't even look over where she normally is. I go somewhere else, right? There are things that happen, like a common one is I hurt my neck. My neck's strained, right? This is a big problem that a lot of people experience. And then you have this chronic discomfort. And if this thing sticks around long enough, from an acute pain to chronic, right? Short-term to long, then you start to build relationships with it, much like cigarette addiction, food addiction, whatever it may be. You build a connection to it of like, oh man, I better not reach up overhead because if I reach up overhead, I'm going to strain my neck. And if I strain my neck, I'm going to be so sad because I can't do the thing that I want to do later. And it creates these chronic pain cycles that are called, that is really a problem for some people. Like you have the combination of you think about your neck, there's an endocrine response of hormones change, and then your body starts to create tension in an area, like almost like a placebo effect, even though it's not there. But because you have the historical reference of the skill of feeling neck tension, it tightens up all of a sudden. So like what you're saying is a total thing, but it is frickin' complicated, and it's very, very difficult to do anything with.
This podcast is brought to you by the Drum Better Daily program. That's actually my online drum school that I've run now for 12 plus years. Not only have I been playing the drums professionally since the age of 15, I've been teaching since the age of 18. Matter of fact, I talked to one of my, or actually my first student a few days ago. I actually called him to see if he could sub a gig out for me. Daniel, love you, man. And he's still playing. He's still doing it on a pro level. I would love to have you go check it out at stevensdrumshed.com. You can find a link to that in the show notes or video description, whichever platform you're watching it on. But it truly is a community of like-minded drummers where we are striving to just be the best that we can be at the drums. In addition to over 70 pre-recorded drum courses, there's also a tech talk area where we talk about everything technology related as it pertains to the drums, e-kits, recording, doing videos, all of that stuff. There are forums where you can hang out with the other students as well. We do 2 live video student calls every week that you can join if you'd like to. We do guest artist calls monthly, and I'll even make you a personalized lesson plan if that's what you need. Yes, we talk about the nuts and bolts of drumming. Yes, I give you exercises, but we also talk a lot about how to practice more efficiently, how to practice better, and how to get more out of your practice time. I know you're just like me. You're busy, you're being pulled by work, by family, by friends, by other responsibilities. Whenever you practice, you really want to see gains and have it be productive. That is what we focus on in the Drum Better Daily program. I'll have to say personally, it's been really cool because some of these students I've worked with for over 12 years, we started running drum camps last year in 2022, and I got to meet some of them in person for the first time. Those drum camps have been selling out. They've been just blowing my mind with how much fun they are and how great a time it is to bring the community together in person. A community that was started online and has been going online strong now for over 12 years. I'd love to have you be a part of it.
One of the reasons I bring it up is I talk to a lot of drummers who will tell me, well, I had to quit drumming because it was causing me XYZ pain. So they quit drumming for 20 years. Or I think I had one that emailed me on Wednesday and I was talking to them about it. I feel like I'm going to have to stop drumming because when I drum, I have shooting pain in my arms all the way up to my shoulders. And which always leads me into, well, hold on, there's lots of drummers that do this and they don't hurt. So let's look at how you're drumming. Let's look at also what are you doing outside of your drumming that could be injuring you, and whenever you get into the drum session, all of a sudden you're triggering whatever that injury. A big one is for people that type at their jobs. This position that we put in ourselves in every day, and we don't change it because we're really fast. We're really fast, so we don't change. And that's really bad for the body. When we have the same position all the time, we do the same thing, the body gets those repetitive use injuries. Even if you just change it half an inch, change the height of your chair, change something where it's making things move differently. And that will injure them without them knowing it. Then they come into the drums. Oh my gosh, drumming hurts me. And I'm like, well, hold on a second. I'm not sure that the drumming did that. Maybe it did. I'm not a doctor. So that's kind of why I brought that up, because for many of my students, I've had to work through this fear that they have of drumming. And this can go into other areas too, by the way. I spoke with someone the other day. They said, I just don't have good timing. And I'm like, I don't believe that. I just listened to you play. They said, no, chronically bad timing. I said, no, you had excellent timing in that song. Well, I just generally have bad timing. So we had to actually go and unravel way back to a specific experience that had happened where they had been told in front of others, you have bad timing. And the problem was they couldn't hear the music. They said, I couldn't hear what was going on. I said, well, I have bad timing when I can't hear, So these fight or flight responses that happen within us all of a sudden become blocks. And I think in the physical world, they do as well. I had another buddy, amazing drummer. I think he expected as he got older that his abilities were just going to decline. By older, we're talking late 40s, early 50s, which is not old at all. And he's a great, but he's a better drummer than I'll ever hope to be, and super kind guy. But he started walking 5-6 times a week, and then he started going to the gym and lifting weights 2 to 3 times a week. That was all the change he did. Just a kind of full body. I'm going to get, and all of a sudden he said, "Man, I feel like I'm 20 playing." And I said, "Well, yeah, just because you expected to get old doesn't mean you have to at this age." So can you kind of speak to some of those things on the physical side?
Yeah, well, I'll say the thing you were talking about with like people telling themselves stuff, like this is outside of my scope. My friend is a psychiatrist, so I hear we talk about it. So it's not my wheelhouse at all. But I do know that if someone has tapes of things that they're telling themselves, I'm not good at this, I'm not doing this, you will become inherently bad at it. Like you tell yourself something, you will. And so there's this great part of the brain that really is responsible for tenacity and willpower called and it's a nerdy word, I'm not trying to be that guy, but called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. And this area of the brain specifically is the part of the brain that you approach the situation, Stephen, and you're walking towards, you go, you know what, this is going to suck and I'm not going to like it, but I know I'm going to get through it. And that part of the brain is interesting because as you get older, it doesn't atrophy. It can get larger. And in fact, when people are fighting cancer on their last days, please pardon me for bringing this up, the ones who fight and get through it, they measured it in several different studies, and that area of the brain, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, is larger. And the only thing is they approached it with, I'm going to fight. I'm going to do this and I'm going to get through it. Now that is a very deep dive, for my timing is bad to cancer, but it's the same idea, right? How you do one thing is how you do everything in most cases. And if you're that kind of person that says, my timing is bad, right? As a drum teacher, you have an incredible responsibility of like, well, how do I navigate this? And when you talk about the body side of it, and I don't want to forget about the strength gym thing, you talk about my neck is sore when I sit and play the drums. When I play the drums, my body's going to hurt. Okay, great. Can you sit in a chair with your back not resting against something and feel no pain? Yes. Then you can play the drums. Because in most cases, if you observe someone, they are doing something. I hate to say it like this. Like it's not like I don't even want to do like the ergonomics is bad situation. It's a body position thing. If you can sit in a chair, relaxed with decent posture and not have your back touching it, then you can work in this window. There is windows of opportunity. There are options. But I get where people get scared, right? I did this thing, my back hurt, the drums are going to hurt my back. I got in a truck. Every time I sit in a truck, not a car, but every time I sit in a truck, my back hurts. I can't do that. And so drum teachers have a very tough job with like, how do you navigate that world? Because you start kicking some sacred cows because,
well, let's kick one right now. If you take Buddy Rich, for instance, who I love, I think he's one of the greatest drummers of all time. He quit drumming and later in his career had debilitating back pain. And it was very obvious that he did and that he was going to, because if you watch Buddy from a very early age, his posture was incredibly bad, and his how he approached playing the drums, and please hear me on this, not how he approached the technical side of the drums. We have to separate that from how Buddy approached the physical side of the drums. It's two different things. Technically, the man is far beyond where I'll ever be, and he got it at an earlier age, and like I get that. But structurally, like how he used the components of his body on the drum set led to, or anyone could look at him playing and go, that is going to lead to injury. And as you said earlier, then when you have this pain, then it gets labeled as something, which you will have people come back and say, oh no, he had this disorder. And I'm like, but where did it come from? Where did it come from? Because you don't just start life with that disorder. It just doesn't show up like that. And please understand, he's one example I'm giving of a lot of examples I could give, but he's a very big one of like, he had to stop drumming because of this pain. And when you look at the person, you can go, okay. And I think this, Brandon, I think this gets in the brain of some people, because one of the things I want to talk about next, real quick while we still have time, but one of the things I want to talk about next is, I have a lot of people that they have a limiting view. They believe that, oh, I'm only going to be able to play the drums for so long because it's a physical instrument, because of this. And you and I both know that as we get older, the people who live the longest are actually, there's a lot of components, but one of the most obvious is they just didn't stop moving. Like they don't stop moving. You look at people that live to 100, they're moving so much. They move all the time. And one of the great things about drumming is we're moving. It's a physical instrument. We're putting weight against our extremities and our limbs. Like this is good for all components of our body if we do it in a correct way. And can you talk around that a little bit about, as we get older, why this physical type of a thing is great for us? I can talk about it on the mental side. There's tons of mental things that happen with music when we're learning it that keep our brains sharp. But it's the same on the physical side for me.
Yeah, there's a ton of great physical stuff. On the Buddy Rich thing, I don't want to poke that bear anymore either, but I will say you don't have to be healthy to be good. Mm-hmm. And that has been exemplified as far within the musicians world, but across like the number of musicians that are incredible, that do cocaine recreationally, the number of musicians that smoke cigarettes that a doctor would say is going to kill you. Right? Like you don't have to there's name your thing, right? There's a lot of those types of things, but some of them are much more nefarious and obvious, while others are much more insidious. And Buddy Rich, unfortunately, we don't know if he had family history of postural stuff or if it was because of the positions he was in. But yeah, you touched on an important thing there, which brings into the next point, right? Drumming as far as a longevity thing, right? There's a combination of like, well, how do you play drums forever? And is playing the drums forever good for you? Well, one, how do you move forever, right? Like you said, I mean, the number of so in my business, I'm kind of a consultant level guy where private physicians will refer people to come see me for biomechanics advice. So I get really high level people, entrepreneurs of all sorts of crazy scales. And the one thing that I'd say that differentiates an 80-year-old that can do chin-ups versus a 63-year-old who passes out at 2:00 in the afternoon because they're so tired is how well they take care of themselves. Mm-hmm. The 80-year-old is responsible. They avoid risk, but they challenge themselves. They go for friction. Like they try to experience some friction and challenges. They just stimulate their mind, to stimulate their body. Drumming is the same thing. It is just another piece of physics that comes into our biology. So if we respect the hormesis, dose response, you will do well. Like your friend who went to the gym. Getting stronger, not biased, solves a lot of problems. Improving your VO2 max, not biased, clinically has been proven to solve a lot of problems. And
for those that don't understand, explain VO2 max, please.
So you have different types of cardio, right? Basically, one is anaerobic, which is where you completely use the oxygen you have stored, but your body doesn't use anything else. You have this kind of 20 to 45 second window of time. Then you get to these aerobic windows, and there's lots of different types of energy systems between anaerobic and aerobic. VO2 max basically is when you breathe in air, you have an amount of oxygen that you can breathe in. But that VO2 max is not necessarily just how much oxygen you can breathe in, it's how well you can optimize it. So if you take Steven, who's an athlete, and you take Lance Armstrong, you guys both might be able to pull in 25 liters of oxygen into your lungs. Lance Armstrong, Steven, I don't know you, so bear with me, but I'm going to guess Lance Armstrong gets more out of that oxygen in his lungs.
He very much does get more than I do.
Optimizes every bit of it more so than you do, and then than I do. And so that has been one of the number one health predictors of health span for people as they get older. It's not just anaerobic, right? The elastic band of your heart going high and down. It's not just aerobic, which a lot of people do, right? Going for walks and going for a bike. It's this intensity of like between 2 and 4 minutes. How long can you sustain activity? How much oxygen can you pull in? And then concurrently, how well can you optimize it?
And if some of you want to do a simple exercise that shows you exactly how high the heart rate can go whenever we're playing the drums, play 16th notes at a moderate BPM around the kit and do it for 5 minutes. Even better yet, put a double bass pedal on the ground, and I want you to play 16th notes constantly for 5 minutes, and then tell me how hard you're breathing at the end of it. Because if you go and play some of, let's say, like Tool songs, there was a Tool song I was playing, and it was 16ths with the hands at a very high rate, as well as with the feet. And I got done with it. I was like, holy, like, I can't breathe. I can't, because it's a workout. And it's actually a great way to get a workout. That's not horrible for you, and you'll be able to get some drumming in. But it will really help you understand how much oxygen we're taking in, how much there's a need for that on the body when we're playing, and why you get short-winded, those types of things when you're playing. So anyway, continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just, sometimes when we get those $20 words, I want to slow it down for people that may not understand what VO2 makes.
That's cool. And please bear with me. I mean, but yeah, and I would agree with you. I mean, honestly, I really do believe, and again, not biased, that every drummer should practice double bass or single strake strokes with their feet, and just in unison strokes. Like, just do you right hand, right foot, left hand, left foot, and just keep going for as long as you can. Because there's a very powerful exercise there and helps you to restore symmetry. And there's a lot of discussion points there. But so if you want to just be a healthy person, forget about drumming. Get as strong as you can, as safely as you can, right? Don't just do yoga. It's very good, but you do need to build up the output, and you need to build up the quickness, the power. Working on flexibility is a part of that as well. And then work on how well your body can manage oxygen, your air, your heart rate, all that stuff. I mean, cardiovascular disease is the number one thing that usually takes people out. So if we think about drumming, why I love this is, one, those ideas not only help you be a healthy person, but they help you play on the instrument better. Like you said, it takes away a lot of the tensions and a lot of the problems. Now, drumming on its own, it's a beautiful thing, because when you think about all the systems between auditory systems, your ears, your eyes, the experience, the smell, everything about it, and then using your hands and your feet, you get to stimulate senses that don't typically get used. If you're someone that's like a lot of drummers have kind of like pseudo ADHD style personalities, where they have a lot of energy and a lot of different things, right? All that sound and all that stuff pulls you in and centers your focus. So a form of active meditation, and you exercise hand and feet muscles that most people don't. And that sounds like such a small thing, but truthfully, in a world where you're wearing shoes all day, and in a world where people don't challenge their hands and build up grip strength, it does wonders for keeping you strong here and in your feet. And there's some really powerful studies, too. One, around grip strength being associated with cognitive decline and other things like dementia, and not studies as much, but a lot of soft research around feet and having healthier foot function, how that just helps you with balance going forward. So I think drumming as a longevity tool is beautiful, because people maybe don't like going to the gym. We'll do this physical thing. I mean, who is Roy Haynes, right? He's 99, I think, right now. 99, he's still playing the drums, and he's straight as an arrow. He thinks about posture a little bit, for sure. He's also got good genetics, obviously, but he's also staying young, because part of what he does is something he loves, but he moves using every part of his body. And we can get into more science of that, but long story short, do the things to keep playing drums and play the drums. It's just going to be a good win.
What are some, just to kind of give people a couple takeaways, who are two or three drummers that they can go and look at and observe playing? One that I always give as for instance, for posture, is Antonio Sanchez. But who are some great drummers that you kind of look to and go, okay, they've got that together in that area?
I'm going to give some people might hate me for this, but what I would say is the drummers that like 15 years ago that were classified as technical drummers, right? Virgil Donati, Thomas Lang, Matt Garshkas, like these kind of Marco Minimans, these kind of guys, I would encourage people, if they don't like that busy technical music, turn the sound off, but just watch them move, right? The thing, like, Thomas Lang, I have a ton of respect for the way he plays and all the stuff that he can do. And not my style personally, but what I would say is that, I go on YouTube and I look up a Thomas Lang drum solo, and there's a 45-minute solo of him playing between 180 and 220 BPM and not sweating at all, with those huge 2B sticks that are 17 inches long. And regardless if you like that or not, there's something to that, right? There's something about the posture, the way he sits on the throne, the way he moves around the drums, the way the positions of the drums are, his physicality, his strength. Like, it's not just luck. He's done some stuff to really help him out. And he's had his own problems and had to come through it. His carpal tunnel syndrome, surgery and stuff like that. Another one that's on the more musical end, but still technical. I think Matt Garska is a great example because he is, some have argued, like a very musical, like Vinnie Colaiuta-esque metal kind of guy in his own right. But at the same time, before he started working out, because now he's much more jacked, before he started working out, you observe him, he would still play those Animals of Leader sets, 45 minutes to 90 minutes, and smash it. Now, I want to say this and emphasize, you may not want to be that guy or girl, and that's cool. What we can do is we can reverse engineer these high-level specimens and go, what's working for them, and what can I reverse engineer and apply into my life? And I think there's a lot that we can learn from them.
And, this brings around, you talking about dose and response and all of those, it brings around a few questions that I've gotten from players over the years. It could be drummers that play in, Weekend Warriors. They could just play once a month. They could be going on their first tour. And one of the questions that I've gotten multiple times is, hey, how am I supposed to get ready for this? How am I supposed to get ready to play a 3-hour set? When I was on Bourbon Street, we had 5-hour shifts, and I was doing doubles. So I'd do a 5-hour shift, I'd have a 30-minute break, I'd do another 5-hour shift. I was on the drums over 10 hours a day. I was also practicing 2 hours a day, which was stupid. I don't know, like, come on, you're already doing the thing, but it was a lot of time on the drums. And I remember when I started, the entire end of my thumb fell off in a blister eventually. Our bass player was having to super glue his fingers so that whenever he would come into the gig at night, just so he could get through it until he had enough calluses built up. So preparing for that, if anyone's preparing for something like that, take Brandon's advice from earlier. And what we want to do is we want to try to ramp up to what that experience is going to be like. And we want to spend weeks ahead of time going, okay, I'm about to go on a 2-week run with this band. We're going to be playing 5 times a week. We're going to be playing 90-minute sets. Here's the set list. And now we need to start the ramp up 3 or 4 weeks ahead of time so that by the time we get to tour time, we're not having these issues or we've prepped our body enough that even though you're going to have these issues, you're going to have nicks, you're going to have cuts, you're going to hit your drums, you're going to fall in a wind, you're going to eat too soon before you play and want to throw up. You're going to have blisters. Like you're going to be 8,000 feet up on top of this mountain and the air is real dry and your skin's cracking and like all of these things are going to happen. I injured my arm. We played down. It was 11 degrees. The gig was 11 degrees and the heaters stopped working on stage and we didn't have enough time to warm up. And it's like, I injured myself for quite a while.
Tough.
But whenever you have a gig coming up, what Brandon was talking about earlier, is you can prepare for that by, hey, let's try to replicate that environment. I'm going to play that much every day at that intensity until I can get there. And then when you feel the blisters coming, back off some and then go. And you'll find that you're in a much better place physically whenever you have to approach that gig.
I mean, you have to prepare for the gig. I mean, you have to. And so I'll give you one more example that kind of agrees with what you're saying. This retired NHL player I see, a few years ago, he played in one of those Heritage Cup games. So he's retired and his team called him back and they play outside with another team. He was very excited about it. But that game was stacked with a few other games. They were playing 3 games in one day. Now, at his age, he hadn't played more than 1 game in an evening in a long time. And so we had months to prepare for it. So I said, okay, go out with your buddies. And then when the second game comes on after you, go and skate with them for their warm-up for 10 minutes. So a game in 10 minutes and do a game in 20 minutes and a game in 3. And then I'll do 2 games in a row. And you got to do this intermittently because a couple of things, you'll discover where your problem areas are. So you'll build up the strength and endurance so you don't slaughter yourself. One woman I helped prepare for the Boston Marathon, she literally ran the Boston Marathon distance a few times a couple weeks prior. So she knew what it would be like. And she did the Boston and she came home, no problems, while most people are crippled. The other side of it, which is another question I get, which is just like what you ask, is whenever I play a gig, I play way harder than I do in my room. How do I prepare for that? And my response is play harder in the room because you have to smash to make sure you're actually exposing yourself to that level of stress. You got to hit as hard as you can. You'll never prepare for it, but you have to try.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brandon, thanks, man. I want to respect your time. Now, where can everybody find you online or hit you up if they have questions?
So right now, I'm very active on Instagram, Drum Mechanics, YouTube, Drum Mechanics Brandon. I have a webpage that's going to be developed, some cool stuff coming, drummechanics.com. But ask me any questions. I'm happy to help any way that I can.
Excellent. Well, man, thanks for taking the time. I really do appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll be talking soon. If you're ever in the Nashville area, hit me up, man, and we'll go grab a cup of Joe or something.
Pleasure to meet, man. Thank you so much for your time. This was truly an honor.
You bet, man.